Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to another Labs Open Office Hour. Today we're joined by Matt Bach, our senior labs technician and resident Adobe Creative Cloud hardware expert. I think that's accurate,
and
yeah?
some black magic stuff.
That's
Quite
true.
a bit with Resolve as well. Yeah,
There's a bit of Resolve in there, so that's cool. Welcome everyone, and thank you, Matt, for joining us today. So this will be, I think, your second or third time on the show. I think we've finally kind of come back around to our normal pattern, and it'll be interesting to see what's changed in the last few months or so.
Yeah,
it's been about a month, I think. Yeah,
a month and a week or two.
But I mean, things can change. I mean, in a week, really. All it takes is some strange software update or somebody releasing some sort of software or hardware, and the whole game has changed. So yeah, actually, let's start there. Like, is there anything interesting, anything new? I saw you had an update to the Puget benchmark.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did. It's a very unexciting update. There's nothing really like functional that people will care about. All it is, I mean, whatever. I'm going to say a little bit. I figured out finally how to include NPM packages into the benchmark, which means I can use Node WMI instead of command line for gathering system specs.
Oh, okay,
so yeah, all you video editors out there, totally makes sense. But awesome. No, it's basically just cleans up some stuff that should make it so that we get less submissions where like the specs are unknown. That's cool. That's all it really is. So it should be better. I guess. I mean, there is one good thing that I included though. Now we're logging video card drivers and motherboard BIOS versions, which
neat.
Can be really, really good. I mean, we've seen it in the past. Like people ask, well, this new video card driver, Nvidia says it's so much faster. And now we'll be able to just like, well, here's the one with a new one and here's one with the old and see, rather than like really having to spend a ton of time. Because yeah, that's one. And like Adobe's been really pushing on making sure people use the latest video card drivers all the time too.
Oh, sure.
With their whole system compatibility report and all that. So hopefully this will just be another tool to see like, oh, this person had a benchmark uploaded and it was low, but oh man, they're using a really old video card driver. Maybe that's it. So it's just, little small iterations. Hopefully that'll get better.
That's cool though. I mean, and I know that sometimes that can make a huge difference. Like we were having some, I think it was with 3ds Max. There was an issue with video drivers and things like that. So yeah, it can make a big difference just going from one. It can either break it or make it better.
And usually, at least with like the Adobe stuff that I've seen, it's usually not a newer video card driver is going to make performance better, but it will make stability better. So I think that's the biggest thing though, is like, how often does a Premiere Pro crash? Well, if you're using an old video driver, sometimes if you're using the newest video card driver, that'll also make it worse. You gotta find that right in between where like, okay, what's the latest video card driver that's stable? Luckily with Nvidia doing their whole like studio drivers, it's kind of better. There's still sometimes where they'll have to release a new studio driver and it's broken, but better.
That always makes me curious. Like when I'll see, just bug fixes without any sort of specific. It's like, well, what did you guys do? Like, what was going on?
Well, usually Nvidia actually, if you dive into their PDFs of their release notes, not just what's on like Nvidia.com, those usually have some decent notes in there. They're still just like miscellaneous bug fixes. Although honestly, I will admit that if you look at like our benchmark update notes, I almost always have that too, just like miscellaneous bugs and improvements. It's because like, oh, while I was fixing this other thing, I noticed this one little thing. Okay, I'll fix that. And I don't remember what it was.
Increased stability.
Yeah. I know I did a bunch of other little things, but I didn't write down what they were, so I don't remember. So
that's always cool. I have to say I've been enjoying, and this goes for all of Labs in general, but I've personally been enjoying the best of series of articles. I think that's been really cool because like something I've noticed as part of my work in social media is oftentimes it's hard to distill. We gather so much data. We go so in depth into all of the testing and stuff. It's sometimes difficult to pull out the the really important nugget, like the question of like, well, just how much faster is this going to be? Like what and so it's really cool to see those articles coming at you from you guys. It just kind of helps distill it down. Just this is what works.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of weird because, or not weird, but because we already have like our recommended systems that kind of do that, but those ones still are like, okay, well, here's a couple of starting points, and then there's another, like you can choose between 3 CPUs or 4 GPUs, and like you can't make a wrong choice. That's the whole point of the recommended systems. But still, like if someone just wants a like, a good, better, best kind of option here, for the people who don't know what we're talking about here, I'll bring it up. Hopefully people can see this. So like this is our one for Premiere Pro, and we're trying to label them as like summer 2020, so that because they're just going to get outdated fast.
Right.
But in this case, we just did a good, better, and best, and so you can go in and it's just like, okay, well, here's our kind of a recommendation, how much it'll kind of run you, and we kind of try to do it by tiers of pricing. Kind of. In this case, it kind of also winds up with like, well, are you doing just 4K editing or 6K editing? So like in this case, like it's a $3,000 system, a 5,000, and a 7,000, and each one it tells you like it's roughly, in this case, roughly 20% faster than the better configuration, and it's just, and like that's a totally generic thing because, well, are you working with H264 or Red, or are you doing VFX work? Like it's totally I don't want to say arbitrary or meaningless number, but it's definitely like an average. So it's not going to apply for everyone, but it's still just to give you an idea of what kind of configuration you want to be working with. And I think it just helps give people a better starting point. Like, okay, well, I know I'm in around the $7,000 range, so let's start with this one. It's got it already filled out. It's roughly the right price already, and then you can do some small tweaks from there. Maybe you need more storage, or you're using a NAS, so you don't need as much storage. But still, it just gives them a little bit better of a starting point. And at some point, I know we need to kind of integrate that into our recommended systems, because like, why don't we have, like, it's tough because like on these kind of pages, oftentimes you're trying to hit like budget limits. It's a whole marketing thing. Like it's a whole like, $99 versus $100.
Right.
And like you kind of have to play those games sometimes. We try to avoid those as much as we can, but sometimes you got to do that.
Right.
Versus, the good, better, best just lets us just, here it is.
Right. And I think too, depending on the software package, it really does kind of come down to just what you're trying to accomplish. You know? If the kind of prosumer YouTuber who might be only working in 4K like footage to get it onto YouTube at 1080p isn't going to need the best system, and so there's that kind of juggle to maintain as well.
Yeah, and into the future, hopefully, I don't know the right approach to this. We've been talking about it a whole lot. Is mixed workflows.
Oh,
like how many video editors spend all of their time in Premiere? Like probably not very many.
Yeah.
They're also going to be working in Photoshop or After Effects or oftentimes Resolve. And then, doing those mixed workflows, I don't know if there's even honestly a solution beyond just talk to one of our consultants and they can help you figure it out. Because like, even if you're just looking at like those 4 applications together, that's how many different combinations. Is that 4 to the 4th, or is that 4 times 3 times 2? I forget it's a lot. It's a lot of different configurations.
At least,
and that's just like if
16.
it's an equal.
Right.
Yes, but that's only if it's like equal. You care like 25% each way. Most people are like, well, I care mostly about Premiere, but I really hate it when I'm in After Effects and it's terrible. So like, I'd rather make sure it's also really good for that, even though I spend only 10% of my time there. So I don't know if there is going to be a way for us like on our website to have a solution for that. But
yeah, that's going to be hard. Yeah. But it's just so fuzzy that the best thing to do is have those kind of conversations for sure. Yeah. So
I'm trying to think of what else has kind of like changed since the last time we did this. Well, on a hardware side, AMD released their Ryzen XT CPUs.
Right.
And Intel released their 10850K CPU. Man, those were I think the most lackluster hardware launches we've like ever seen.
Well, yeah, especially when the Intel offering was what, like 200 megahertz slower.
Slower. Although that one, I think that's the one that makes the most sense
Really?
because Intel, the 10900K, the supply is not keeping up with demand.
Oh wow.
So I think that makes sense because they can launch a lower end SKU, a slightly lower end, and that
Mm,
just lets them basically sell off the chips that didn't quite make binning for the 10900K. Because I mean, they
sure.
how Intel works is, and AMD, and Nvidia probably too. They like make a whole bunch of chips, and
Right.
then like if they start off with 10 cores like the 10900K, and if one of those cores is bad, they just turn it and another one off, and now it's an 8 core model, and they turn that into a 10700K.
Right.
And I'm guessing the same thing with like frequency. So these are like 10900Ks that didn't quite meet their like stability or reliability metrics to like run at the full speed of a 10900K. So
Sure.
they just turn it down a litlittle bit, and now you can buy it as a 10850K, and it alleviates the supply issues,
Yeah.
and it gives, and they're charging slightly less for it, so it's not like you're getting less for your money.
That's nice.
If anything, you're getting more for your money because the performance difference is almost nothing, and it's like $40
Oh,
cheaper. So
yeah. Yeah, I think you were saying it's like almost within margin of error, if I remember
yeah,
right.
like all this
It's
stuff.
like it might as well be equal for all
Yeah,
for
and
all that
that's why,
matters.
like, for our systems, I think that's like the backup. I mean, we're obviously going to refund our customers that the price difference, but
Sure.
it's the same thing. And that's why I think the AMD's Ryzen XTs are like more of a head scratcher because they're like 100 megahertz faster, which 100 megahertz is nothing,
Yeah, right?
and they're charging a premium for it. So like, okay, you can pay more money and like maybe you'll get a percent, but like, it's a percent. Like you can't really tell. Are you going to be able to tell the difference between playing back your media at 30 FPS or 30.1 FPS or whatever it
Right.
is? Like, no. So yeah, it's such a weird launch, and like we published some articles out, like, but we kind of grouped them together. I didn't do one for Premiere and After Effects and Photoshop and Lightroom. I said Adobe CC because the
Right.
answer is it's the same, and I didn't want to write it's the same 5 times over in a bunch of articles.
Right.
So, but I think that's really like the only real like hardware thing that's happened in the last little bit. I mean, we've got stuff coming up.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nvidia's at some point launching some new video cards.
Right.
Uh, I think actually there was even a question about that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
well, whatever. But yeah, I mean those new video cards at some point, everything's all NDA, and so like
Can't.
there's very little public
Yeah.
to talk about it at all.
But so actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because we do have a question from YouTube. P Glazer, he says, "Hey guys, for 10th gen Intel, you've only made K, the 125 watt TDP chips available. Any thought to offer lower TDP chips for a Serenity build because of the lower cooling demands, or is that too much of a performance hit?"
First of all, TDP is stupid. I'm sorry to say, TDP is the most useless spec, or TDP or TDW, whatever you want to,
Sure.
like AMD, Intel, they all, even like video cards now,
Hmm.
because TDP is the power draw at base clock,
Okay.
which nothing ever runs at base clock. If it's not being put under heavy load, it's going to speed step down, or whatever AMD calls it, down to really low speeds. And if you do put any load on it, it's going to turbo
Yep.
and go up to really high speeds depending on how many cores you're using. And so like, yeah, TDP, I think it's a marketing spec. Like
Sure.
there's no way that the like all of the X series CPUs from Intel are all the same TDP. Like, no,
Right.
it's just not possible. And especially like if you actually run it and you like look at your power draw or cooling, like, no, it's totally not the same.
Right.
I wish someone would come up with a better power draw metric. But really, all we have to go with right now is like Tom's Hardware does a good job, or Nantech does a good job at like measuring power draw.
Right.
But I think like, okay, getting beyond the TDP rant, the actual question is like using lower end chips and like Serenity builds and stuff. And I mean, we kind of do. I mean, we allow the 10700K,
Hmm.
I believe. But really, for us, like the kind of needs of our customers, we basically find that the 10700K is like the cutoff of good enough, I guess, for a lot of people. Once you go below that, the performance drop just becomes more and more significant, because it's really a like diminishing returns is really what it is. Like the more money you pay, it's diminishing returns. But that means that at that lower price bracket, and like the $0 to $150 price bracket, every step up you go is pretty
It's a
big and
pretty
significant.
big change. Yeah.
Yeah. And for us, it just works out that the 10700K, or on like the AMD side, it's I think we do we go down to the 3700X, or is it just the 3800X? I can't remember which. Um, but
Let's see. Serenity.
oh, I
Okay.
don't think it's on Serenity.
Oh,
It would just have to be on any of the Ryzen systems. But either way, like there's that point where like, man, those significant performance jumps stop happening quite to the same degree.
right.
And right now it's just the 10700K, and we could offer lower, but it's also kind of a, oh man, this is getting into kind of like business stuff, not really
Oh,
content
sure.
creation, but I mean, whatever. But it's kind of also for us, if we go too low end, it's really, really hard for us to, I mean, I guess a way to say it is to have enough margin or enough, it's not really profit, but revenue for us to like be able to offer the same level of like service. You know,
Sure.
whether it's the pre-sale, post-sale, during the sale, like the production. That's why generally we don't have those kind of like lower end kind of parts. It's just because we can't do that and offer the same level of service.
Yeah. I think a big part of it also comes down to just. I mean, it's a combination of a few factors. It's kind of like you said about the different combinations. If you add just one processor difference, that's now how many different configurations can
Oh
spread
yeah,
out
didn't
from
even
that.
talk about that.
There's inventory, there's acquisition, and so it's one little change like that causes a ripple across everything. So let's see. Oh, here's kind of a good opinion question. Is there any reason to upgrade from a 9900K?
To like a 10900K?
Yeah, let's say
Uh,
the big leap there.
yeah. Oh man, I don't remember. There's so many numbers. I think it's like 10%, if I'm remembering right.
That's a pretty decent jump.
Um, let's see. I'm trying to find. I always have to look up my own articles because I can never remember absolutely
There's
everything.
it's too much data. There's so
Yeah, it's
much.
too much. Let's see. Let's see. 10900K. I'm just gonna go with Premiere. It's pretty like general.
That's good.
Let's see. 9900K to 10900K, going from 717 to 778.
717 to
17 to
78.
7, yeah, 8%. So it's I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard question. Like, is 8% gonna make a big difference?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like in terms of like live playback. So I'm again gonna kind of assume here we're talking about like video editing.
Right.
But I mean, we could talk about other things if it was actually something else. But like 8% for like live playback, that's really not going to make the difference between my playback is stuttery or my playback is buttery smooth. It like might make the stutteriness a little bit better, but it's probably still going to stutter. And
Sure.
if your playback's already buttery smooth, well, you don't need that extra performance. So I think 8% or 10% or so, if like export performance is a concern,
Yeah.
great.
Let's say
It can make a
let's say
difference.
renders.
Yeah, like renders and stuff, or
Mhm.
even like ingesting of media and all that kind of stuff, or transcoding or proxies. Yeah,
Sure.
it can make a little bit of a difference, a noticeable difference. But like for like live stuff, probably not going to be a big difference.
There we go.
Yeah, it's probably generally like myself. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say myself because I skipped like 4 generations between upgrades.
Right, like same.
But I think most people like professionally working, I think going up 1 generation is almost never going to be worth it.
Right.
2 can be, depending on the kind of like performance improvements we saw. Like going from 1st gen Ryzen to 3rd gen Ryzen is amazing.
Oh, huge.
even first
Yeah.
gen Ryzen to second gen Ryzen was pretty big.
Yeah.
But I think for most people, you got to wait at least 2 generations, oftentimes 3. Um, but it all comes down to like how
Like,
much your time is worth. I
mm-hmm,
mean, we
mm-hmm.
have some customers where they say, "Hey, you give me 5%, I'll buy 100,000.
Right.
Well, maybe not 100,000. I can wish it was $100,000 but they might say like, I want to know when there's like a 5% bump,
Well,
and
because like
to them,
those minutes add up.
yeah,
I kind of touched on that with Chris Clements the other day about. I mean, his improvement was massively significant. It was like 10 times faster, like literally 10 times faster. But when you think about, he was talking about like when you think about, man, how much time did I lose in the last 3-4 years
mhm,
waiting for my renders to happen that were taking an hour plus, and when they could have been taking 10, 15, 20 minutes, and how much more could I have accomplished? How much time? How much money? Because that
yeah,
always ends up being the case. Like it sometimes, especially as you go up the just complexity and things, the bigger the customer, the bigger the project. Minutes can be thousands of dollars. So
well, and for some people, like being able to say, I can finish this job a bit faster than someone else means that they'll get that job. So it actually can mean that you're going to get more business if you can say, I can do this faster or more
yeah,
reliably, because like, your system's not going to crash or whatever.
right,
And just like frustration. Um,
yeah,
like one of the things that people always want to know about, I'm going to switch over to like a photo editing here a little bit, but it
sure,
applies to everything, is like in Lightroom, say, they don't oftentimes care about the export performance. What they care about is like, I'm using my brush and like drawing things, doing corrections, or I'm moving the sliders. And these are
right,
things that take a fraction of a second. But if you can make that a little bit smoother, a little bit less clunky, that just makes like them be more in the zone a lot easier. It doesn't take them out of the zone when like it's not as significant as like the application crashing,
sure,
but they don't have to like think about it. It's just a tool that they're using rather than something they're fighting against.
yeah.
So in those
That's a
cases, like
that's a good point.
yeah, and if you have like an editor on staff and you're paying them, 120,000, 120,000 dollars a year,
Hmm.
yeah, what's a like $5,000 workstation if they can be a little bit more productive?
Yeah, yeah,
That's so for those people, it's like they don't care what the money is. Like they
right.
just want the best and they constantly want to be at the best so that they can those people that they're paying so much money for can just like be as efficient as possible. I mean, we even have done that kind of around our office, not with our
Oh
computers
yeah,
as much, but like we invested in IPK VMs for all of our test beds and labs so that
yeah,
we can remotely access. Like those things are not cheap; they're like $500 each, and we're putting on every single test bed. But like that means that now like I can do stuff from home, which I mean right now is very important.
yeah,
But
yeah.
also like even normally it would mean that like, oh, if I got like a notification that like, oh, this benchmark broke, I can just like hop on from home, in 5 minutes, fix it, hit go again. And rather than waiting until the next day and coming in and like being able to fix it and start the benchmark again, it'll be done when I come in the next day. Like that's a very significant kind of an upgrade with very tangible benefits. But same thing with like computer.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Oh man, we're doing really good with questions. So this one's from Twitch. Jay Chamberlain asks, in Premiere, editing 4K video with minimal effects applied, do you think it would be worth upgrading from 32 to 64 gigabytes of RAM?
RAM, probably not. RAM is one of those things that like you have enough or you don't, and that's really all it is. So
Sure.
the only thing I would check, because estimating how much RAM you need is really, really, really hard. Let's see, what do we say for RAM? What do we recommend?
It feels like 32 seems to be the good spot
Yeah,
across
so
everything these days.
yeah, I mean, you said 4K, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so 4K, we do generally recommend 64 gigs. Generally on RAM, though, we aim a bit high because you never know, like, well, how many Chrome tabs are they going to have open?
Right.
um, so usually, like, if people really want to figure out how much RAM and whether they should upgrade, I just tell them open Task Manager and just like do your edits for a while, and then before you like close things down, just look at Task Manager and see how much RAM is being used. If you're at 80% or above, yeah, upgrading is probably going to make a big difference because it's having to like recycle RAM and get things out of there and stuff. If it's 80% or below, no, it's probably not going to do anything for you. So since you're not like running into problems right now, that's all I would do is just look at Task Manager, look at the RAM tab, and see if it's at 80% or above.
Nice. Come on. He says thanks.
Sure.
Let's see what else we got here. So there have been. I'm kind of looking at your notes for the show here.
Yeah, I actually wrote down notes like, oh, what could we possibly talk about?
Well, so actually, one that stood out that I missed this, but a compare. So I know you had done a kind of forward look at the new H.264 encoding graphics. So they're now utilizing GPU encoding in Premiere Pro. I missed it or wasn't paying close enough attention, but you do have an article comparing Nvidia versus AMD for this, and I'm just kind of since we got you here and we're talking about it, what's the TLDR on that?
Well, here I'll share screen again.
We'll bring it up.
Don't have to try to find the article.
There we go.
But yeah, so we looked at, because we did like you said, we did an early thing when it was in beta, looking at just like very quickly kind of seeing how it was. And then we did a more involved one, looking at a whole bunch of different video cards because we wanted to see like, well, how much does the video card matter? Because with things when you're dealing with like hardware encoding and decoding, sometimes it's like, because it's not actually like the GPU core being used, it's like built on hardware. So maybe it doesn't matter. And in this case, like, yeah, it's not really a big difference. Like that's 10% between the dual 2080 Ti's and a 2060 Super. That's not really a lot. It's a little bit, but that's not really a lot. I think the biggest things that we found was the Nvidia implementation is way better than AMD, which that's kind of par for the course with Adobe. Adobe just loves Nvidia and CUDA over AMD and OpenCL.
Okay.
I don't know why, but they just it almost always between the two, you're paying the same amount of money, you're going to get better performance out of an Nvidia card in Adobe applications. So that's one of the things we looked at. Live playback won't matter. Because we're talking about exporting
right
to H64. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, I was mixing things up. So this first one up here, this is like our overall like benchmark performance. So this does include like GPU accelerated effects and stuff. So that's like 10%. So like it's not a big deal. Exporting to x64 using the hardware encoding, that's right. It was like nothing. Between like all of the RTX cards, they're all basically the same. There was some interesting things like using dual GPUs was slightly faster, which shouldn't be because this hardware-based encoding only supports a single GPU. And that's like official from Adobe. They said it only supports a single GPU. So I'm not really sure what that is. It's just kind of one of those like, weird. But still, like you're not going to get another 2080 Ti to get, slightly faster export times most of the time. Like even the added complication of it in your system means it's going to be more prone to problems. So why do it? But again, like having Nvidia over AMD, I mean, the 1660 Ti was basically the same performance as a 5700 XT, and like, you should just go with Nvidia. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else in there, but that's basically all it was. I mean, we looked at a bunch of different stuff of like exporting to H64 and H265 and a bunch of different bit rates, all of this other stuff. And like, there is a lot of differences between what you're doing. But from like a hardware standpoint, it was like, nah, it's all kind of the same. Like, yeah, sometimes it's more important to be using a GPU over others, but yeah, it's still just the answer is just use NVIDIA.
Yeah, there was also a previous question was kind of a two-parter. One I know is just one of these generic ones that we always end up getting from Zero Alpha Design on YouTube. He says, "Hey, any news on the new RTX 30 series?" Which, no, not really. Not anything else that hasn't already been said. I think. But I think the more interesting part of this question is it okay to mix different graphics cards for a rendering dual setup? I'm looking to pick up a cheap RTX 2070 and then a 30 when it drops.
I'm guessing by rendering you mean like ray trace rendering using something like Octane render or Arnold render, not like Adobe stuff. Because any like video rendering,
Hmm?
uh, usually multi GPU isn't going to really do anything for you unless you're using DaVinci Resolve. In DaVinci Resolve, it's like the actual rendering isn't using multiple GPUs. That's for like handling open effects and noise reduction and stuff.
Okay.
And I think in that case, I think you can mix video cards technically.
Ooh.
You are, oh, but man, there's so many like gotchas. It's going to use whatever the lowest amount of VRAM is, which in something like DaVinci Resolve, well, because it's having to do the same things on two different cards. And if one card has 8 gigs of VRAM and one has like 12, well, you can't like that extra 4 gigs that you might need is just like
Oh,
missing.
that makes sense. Okay.
So like you can't load the same size of frames and stuff into there. So like if you're doing 4K editing, that might be a big issue. But I think the bigger thing is just how many problems you're going to have in like Windows. Because I mean, if they're very similar cards, like a 2080 and a 2080 Ti, probably not going to have an issue. The biggest problem is going to be like once you get more than one like different like generation, or especially different architectures. Oh man, Windows can screw stuff up. Like you might get it like working just fine by like installing the video driver and getting it all nice and clean and stuff. But then Windows Update's going to come along and like push an update to like one of the cards and not the other, and it's just ugh. So generally, I say try to avoid doing that if you at all can. But there are times like ray trace rendering. So this is again talking like Octane or something like that, like 3D rendering, where it can be worth the hassle just because that stuff is like so good at GPU scaling that putting another card in almost of anything is worth it. So for those ones, it could be between like a 20 series and the upcoming 3000 series.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard to know because it depends on how many architecture changes they make.
Sure.
Because if they're very similar cards and it's kind of like the whole like 2080 to 2080 Super refresh, it's like, whatever, it's basically the same thing. But if they make big changes and like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw things out there. Like if they have like, they're using different memory architecture or like different PCIe speed, or I don't know. The more different they are, the more likely your system is to like start having blue screens or the applications crashing. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you know, making up a number. Yeah, making up a number, maybe you'll increase the chance of a problem by 10%. I don't know, I'm totally making that up. But so you just got to decide for yourself, is that slightly higher chance worth the added performance? And it just depends on how much performance it will be. Oh, so you said Octane or Redshift. Yeah. It's probably worth doing in those cases, honestly. But if you ever have any problems, turn off that second card and see if those problems go away.
That would be an interesting like thing to look if there was ever enough free time to bother. But like, what happens if you do pair a 1660 Ti with a 2070?
Yeah,
or,
well, I mean, we've kind of done some of that, and people do that all the time. Like usually, you can find in forums people talking about it, and something like Octane and Redshift, I think it's officially supported, so like it should work. And I don't think Octane or Redshift is going to be your problem.
Right.
Windows is going to be your problem.
Yeah, I can just imagine the driver issues is probably going to be the biggest thing. You know, you go to download one for the 2070 and then another for the other, and those are going to be totally different drivers.
Well, they're supposed to be. They should be the same drivers. They should be.
Yeah.
The same driver package and stuff. That's why I think it's mostly going to be Windows Update. Just like, hey, there's an update for this video card. Okay, great. What about the other one? Well, I'm not looking at that one right now.
Right.
Great. Okay, thanks.
That'd be funny. They're just interesting little connects. Because I know, like with like NVLink and things like that, they're generally pretty strict. They have to be like the same, even almost to the point of manufacturer. Like it has to be the almost the exact same card.
Yeah.
So
But when you're talking about ray tracing, like all you're doing is simulating light rays. And
sure.
so like each ray goes to like a different core on a GPU anyway. So does it really matter if they're on two different GPUs or the two GPUs are like different speeds? Technically, no. So
Huh.
for those, it's not the application that's the problem.
Oh, this is a good one that I've been hearing about the last couple times. The new After Effects Roto Brush.
Oh, that thing's awesome.
Yeah, that
Roto
seems
Brush
really
2.
really cool, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's very exciting stuff.
Yeah, I was just
At
playing
least
around with it even the other day, and like
that's neat.
because I am really bad at rotoscoping, because I don't do it very often.
Sure. Yeah,
But like, it's amazingly good.
that's leveraging probably Sensei, right? From Adobe. It's
Oh
a
yeah,
very
oh yeah,
like
definitely.
AI kind of backed thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's kind of. I mean, what's really interesting with a lot of this stuff is like there's a lot of overlap. So it's kind of like the object selection in Photoshop
right.
that they're like kind of bringing to After Effects. Uh, Maybe I might even be able to show kind of what is. Let me see here.
Because I thought I saw it related to iPad, but I might be mixing that up with something else. Actually, that just brings on to a whole nother topic about how robust Adobe's like iPad apps are.
Yeah.
It's constantly blowing my mind how powerful they are making those.
Let me see if I can do. Oh man, so this is a terrible video. I think this was just like a test
Oh.
video or something. But it's so good. Like you just select it and you say, "This is me," and just like Photoshop, like you can refine. Say, "No, that's not me. That's not me. That is me. That is me." It might have a
Oh,
problem here with my beard.
I see the little
And
red
you
edge.
yeah, you get the edge, and then you can just like scrub forward. Does this actually work? I haven't done like this clip. 6, 7, 8. Okay, I guess there's only 8 frames. But it'll like, oh, like, well, like it lost my ear, whatever. But like, see, it's like tracking you, and so you can do it. It's just like way faster rotoscoping. Like you have to go back and fix stuff and stuff. This isn't a very good demo, so I'm going to switch back because my computer's not that fast.
No, that's all right.
It'll take a while. But yeah, it's so much better. And for I saw some videos of people talking about it, like they were outside with like trees behind them and stuff, and just like dancing, and like it just you just kind of like say, no, this is the subject, and then go.
That's so cool.
And and the one step beyond this, like, which is again nothing official from Adobe or anything, but Photoshop has the select subject. So you don't even like select anything, or like in my case, you draw a box from here to here, and it would just know like, oh, this is probably what you want, and it would select that subject. So it's probably that's just like the next step. You just say like, I want you to rotoscope this area, figure out what it is I want, and it just figures out what you want and it tracks it.
It's amazing.
That'll be so good because like that whole object selection thing in Photoshop is pretty darn good.
It's very, very accurate. I did it a few months ago.
Smart.
Yeah, I was just kind of cutting people a person out of a solid background, so I probably gave it a very easy task to do, but it was fantastic. They're doing such amazing.
Yeah, I mean, all of these tools right now, especially like, it's designed to get you 90% of the way there. So like, it's not going to be perfect. You're just still going to have to do some refining.
Sure.
But it gets rid of 90% of that work. So you just have to deal with the refining and making it perfect.
And especially if I've in these talks I've heard whether directly or just somewhat tangentially, like rotoscoping sucks. Yes. Nobody likes having to do that. And just for anybody who doesn't already know, rotoscoping is when you cut somebody out and then paste them kind of into something else. It's I think that's super oversimplifying the concept, but like oftentimes you got to do frame by frame by frame, and for when you have a 10, 20 minute or more, God forbid you're doing this on like a feature length film, like
That's why like
so
the like
tedious.
credits at the end of like a movie, you know, nowadays, like if you watch, there'll be whole sections for like rotoscoping, like whole
It's-
companies that do this.
That's all
And
they
it's just
do.
like dozens and dozens of people. Like that's all they did. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
did this for a year. I rotoscoped frame by frame.
I
Ugh.
cut people out and pasted them into, or yeah, it's mind boggling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another question from YouTube from 0 Hour. He says this is a little unrelated, but why are more applications not utilizing the GPU more? Like, couldn't that be useful in something like optical character recognition?
I think that's kind of a two-part. So I think the big thing is GPU is still fairly new for a lot of things. Like CPUs have been around forever. They've been using it forever for so many different things. And porting code over from running on the CPU to a GPU is not as easy as just like changing in the config file GPU equals 1 or something. It's a lot of complicated. Plus, you have like different SDK versions. So like if you want to use CUDA is, I'm not a developer, but from what I understand, like it's very well documented, very easy to work with. But there's so many different versions. Like if you have an older video card, you know, it might just not work, or you have to update to the latest versions of CUDA and stuff. So it's not as like universal. Plus, then you have like, well, what if they have an AMD GPU? What if they don't have a GPU and they're just using like integrated graphics? Right. So anything that you make GPU capable, you also have to make for AMD, Nvidia, and like fall back on CPU. So I think that's part of it. Is just it is more complicated, but it can be so much faster for the right things. But not everything is right for GPU. Great example is like a lot of things in like After Effects would be terrible for the GPU because it's doing things like frame by frame. It has to do things like in a certain order. So it's what we would call single threaded. Like it's only going to use a single core on your CPU, just the nature of how it works. It's just that's what it is. And GPUs are really bad at those kind of things, but they're really good at when it's super highly parallel, because GPUs have thousands of cores. But making something scale that well is actually very, very, very difficult. There's some things like we were talking about ray tracing before, where you're just simulating light rays. That's super easy to scale. That's why I like things like Octane or Redshift have like amazing scaling with video cards. But you know, anything else, and it comes down to if you really want to nerd out about it, you can look up Amdahl's law. We've done some stuff on it in the past, but it's basically any slight loss in efficiency of scaling across multiple cores, it has a really hugely significant impact. Like you can be 99% efficient, and that's considered crap. Like that's not good enough. Because like, oh, after 4 cores, you're just not seeing any speed up anymore. It just falls off so fast. But for things like, I don't know, but there's a lot of good frameworks that are starting to come out. Like there's even like Windows ML, Windows Machine Learning framework that like I think that uses GPU natively. So if you're doing anything like machine learning, like man, yeah, that should be running on the GPU. I think I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard of a reason why you wouldn't run that on GPU because all these frameworks already exist. Or like even in like Adobe stuff, they've got their whole Sensei stuff. And that stuff all uses the GPU because it's just super good for that kind of a thing. So I think it just depends on how you're doing it. Like I think you mentioned optical character recognition. Well, if you're doing that with machine learning, yeah, man, you should. But I think a lot of the apps that are out there kind of doing that are still doing it with like legacy code. They're not upgrading to this new version. But like Photoshop has the new like font thing where like you select some text and it tries to tell you what font it is. Neat. That's 100% machine learning.
Yeah,
so that's using your GPU.
Huh. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I imagine too, especially when it comes to like say Adobe, they're like, I think Adobe catches a lot of flack for not implementing, despite the advances they've made, especially in recent years, but for not implementing more GPU related, like I suppose machine learning or just more GPU accelerated stuff. You got to think they've built. I imagine there hasn't been a major like structural code rewrite for an Adobe application in 10 years. Like they're
Oh,
probably
longer than
just
that.
stacks on
It
stacks on stacks of old code.
Yeah.
And so
It's probably pretty bad if you actually were a developer.
I'm,
I'm sure they
I,
find code like, oh, this is from version 1.0 50 years ago or
you
20
know,
years ago.
and so yeah, trying to implement what is essentially, because you got, I think there's a perspective issue too. Is like it's only been in the last few years that has there really been this explosion of GPU accelerated everything, and so people are still learning how to do it and what it can be used for, and then there's still like oh, I have this cool idea, can I use GPU compute for this? Well, yes or no, and then you have to try and figure it out, and that takes months or years just to test and figure out
Yeah.
if you can. So we're still very very in the very beginning stages of what we can even do with all of this, and
And there's some like times where it sounds like it'll be awesome and it turns out not to be.
mhm.
Prime example, DaVinci Resolve. So there's red media. It's a type of codec,
Uh
and
huh.
it uses the GPU for debayering. That's taking the raw sensor data from your camera and turning it into like a usable image for editing.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's used the GPU for debayering for a very long time. And that's one of the reasons why I love it. And like I like it when our customers say they're using red because like we can just throw a more powerful GPU at it and it'll make it better. But they added in their SDK, the red SDK for like processing red footage, the ability to decode the footage using the GPU as well.
Oh.
And so like that was supposed to be this huge thing, like, oh, it'll be absolutely amazing. It means you can edit like 8K media even on like a laptop. And there's a ton of like publicity around it, especially from like Nvidia before it launched. And then it launched and like no one's heard anything.
Oh.
And the reason why is because it turns out like we've I think we have a whole article on this. It turns out that when you do both the debayering and the decoding on the GPU, you're overloading your GPU in a lot of cases. So your
Oh.
GPU is running at 100% and your CPU is sitting over here at like I'm sitting here at like 2%, 5% because I'm not doing anything. I'm just waiting on the video card. So in a lot of cases, it's just like as long as you have like a mid-range CPU or above, it's better to keep that decoding on the CPU because it's like just sitting there with idle cycles and keep
Mhm.
just the debayering on the video card because that spreads out the load across multiple components. So it's actually faster to not be doing that stuff on the GPU because it's already under a heavy load.
Ah.
And the really hard thing with something like that is they have an option in the settings for like, well, what do you want to use the GPU for? Debayering or debayering and decoding? And well, which one? The only way to know on your own computer, based on your video card and your CPU, is just to like try it either way and then find out which one's better.
Sure.
So like that's kind of annoying though. Like you have to know that setting's there. You have to try it both ways and do like test exports or test playback, and then decide which one is right for you and then use it. So this whole like move everything to GPU, that's not the right answer
Right.
for any of this. Like GPUs are insanely powerful, but if we move everything there, then like the CPU is just not going to be doing anything. And
Right.
like so it's always going to be a balance, and that's kind of the same reason why like sometimes people will say like, "Wow, man, my CPU is only running at 40%, my GPU is at like 40% too. Where's my bottleneck?" It's like, no,
Right.
that's good.
It's just
That means that like your CPU is doing stuff, your GPU is doing stuff, and like yeah, they're both idle sometimes, but it's still faster than if like your CPU is 100%. Like that's
yeah.
not good. You don't want anything at 100%. That means you
Yeah.
got a bottleneck.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sounds to me like this, for me at least, if I had saw that situation, that's good. You want to spread that out. You don't want either side. You don't want any of your components to be maxed out. RAMs, like it bugs me when I'll see my, like I know my Steam downloads are being held back by my hard drive write speed.
Yeah.
Like my downloads have to wait for the hard drive to catch up first, and then it's
It's tough. I
well,
mean, because there's always going to be something that's limiting it.
yeah, of
But more
course,
and more, as we're using more and more different parts to do processing, the things that are going to limit it are actually the invisible things. It's like the bus transfer speed, the PCIe speed, the memory read and write speed because you're moving things around. So it's all these invisible things that like there's no way to log that kind of stuff. And I
right,
think that's why it's so important. Like when we do our benchmarks, like we don't even look at load percentages. Like who cares? Who cares what the CPU load is? What
right.
matters is like does upgrading the CPU do anything for performance, because oftentimes it can. Like the CPU might sit there at 40% load, and upgrading the CPU gives you a nice performance bump. Like, great. That's all I care about. I care about the
Right.
performance. I don't care about what Windows says the load is.
Yeah. This one has come up. I think I saw it in a comment on one of our articles, but now that it's fresh in mind, from Twitch, Neor Matrix is asking, are you guys testing hardware for that new 12K camera that is coming out, editing 12K raw 12K footage? It's called the Ursa Min Pro.
Yeah, the Ursa Mini Pro. Yeah, at some point. I've been meaning to do just like a post just with some testing using because Blackmagic puts out sample files that you can just download and run. The problem with us with like benchmarks is we like having our benchmarks the ability for anybody to run them, and I don't think we have permission to like redistribute those kind of sample files. So we have to find someone who has that camera who's willing to shoot a couple of test clips for us, send those to us, and that way we can integrate it into our stuff. But man, I don't know if I haven't really seen anyone do much about this. But my concern is that if you're actually trying to edit 12K natively, I don't know if you could have enough video RAM to do that without going up to like an RTX 8000 with 48 gigs of RAM, of video RAM. Because even like 8K needs like a video card with 20 gigs of VRAM, or else you're just going to get out of GPU memory errors. So yeah, like you need way more. And then the other side of things is, well, you could also take that 12K and drop it into an 8K timeline, and then you don't need as much video RAM. But I don't know, like every time I've done testing like that, where I take like 8K red and drop it into a 4K timeline, it's really not that much different than just a 4K red clip in a 4K timeline. So I don't know. I'm not sure. We also aren't doing any Blackmagic raw like tests at all right now, and that is again something that I want to do. I do want to add at some point. It's just kind of weird right now because like Resolve is the only application that has good Blackmagic raw support. Like there is plugins, like Blackmagic has a plugin for Premiere.
How about that?
But everything I've heard is it's terrible. Like it's just awful and it crashes and like it's bad. So it might be one of those things where like, well, once it's better supported across multiple apps, then we'll have to worry about it more. The one thing we can do, and that we do this for a number of like potential customers right now, is if that is a concern for you, make sure you talk with one of our reps. And if you can send us a test clip, even if it's like from the Blackmagic site, and we can do like, okay, we'll test it on a couple of different kinds of hardware, and we'll tell you what the performance is so that you know what you're getting before you get the system. Like we do that all the time for customers, and like it's well worth it.
Yeah, right on. I mean, it just seems to me like, I don't know. The question comes to me is like, who's really, for one, it's like bleeding edge. This is brand spanking new stuff. But who's really going to be using this?
Oh, YouTubers. Come on, man.
Oh, YouTubers. Yeah, right. Yeah.
All those like YouTubers who have red 8K cameras. It's like, why?
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, we probably will, but not until it becomes a little bit more like commonplace, I suppose.
Yeah, it's always tough with like the testing we do, because like the reason we do our testing is to help our customers, like straight up. And so like we have to justify what we spend our time on with whether it's going to be useful to our customers. And I mean, from just a purely like money standpoint, it has to convert into workstation sales. I mean, really.
Sure. But also like just the community at large, because like it comes back around to who's really using these cameras, and is it really it's a solution looking for a problem? You know, if we were to test it, like, is this valuable information for anybody? Because 3 people out there are actually using this kind of footage.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be more. I think a lot of people who get one of these cameras, they're not going to actually be shooting at 12K all the time. They're going to use that very rarely.
I can just imagine.
I mean, you can't even deliver anything.
The data.
It's got to be nuts.
8K, like just 8K raw, I think is in the gigabytes per minute. Like you fill up one of those like red cartridges in 8 minutes or something like that. It's insane. Like you fill up 40 gigs like that, and so 12, you're probably packing a whole NAS just to record with. Like that's got to be insane. I can't imagine the storage solution necessary to film at that high of a
Yeah.
resolution.
I mean, that's also kind of a weird thing because they have different compression levels, and Red does this
Oh,
too. So,
sure.
like,
Okay.
yeah, you could shoot at a really high compression level, and that way it's not as much storage, but then it's harder to process afterwards, even more. And at a
Mhm.
certain point, like, why are you shooting at 12K with such high compression that it looks worse than 8K at lower compression? But yeah, it's an interesting one, and 12K is just so cutting edge. Like, already on a lot of our tests, I sometimes skip over our 8K tests simply because people don't. There's not a lot of people doing it,
Sure.
and so 12K is just even a step beyond that. So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be one of those things where like we include it in some of our tests, but we don't always do it just because. I mean, the more time we spend on those kind of things is less time we can spend on things that apply to a greater number of people. So
Mhm.
it's always a tough balance. I mean, we only have so many hours in the day. We only have so many people we can afford to pay. So what's more useful? Being able to test Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, and Lightroom, or do Premiere Pro and include 12K and 8K, but not be able to test Lightroom? Well, that's for the
Yeah.
people that are in Premiere Pro. Yeah, totally do that. But for like everybody, well, all those photographers now we're kind of are getting nothing.
Plus, this also like is a good, I think, a good opportunity to plug the fact that hey, you, the folks at home, can totally take our benchmarks and try this out on your own. Um, it may not be quite the we have access to a lot more different hardware and things like that, but just to kind of give an idea of what you are capable of, and then as we collect that data from everybody else, we can have an opportunity to have a kind of more of that sort of in-depth conversation about, well, looking at the benchmark results that we've collected, we can kind of make some assumptions there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But man, yeah. And what happened? So just this is a bit of a joke, kind of half jokey question, but if we're gonna jump from 8 to 12K, what happened to 10? Like it looked like there was. It's like they were stepping in twos. So did we just forget about 10K
Oh, we went
or?
from kind of 1K ish to 2K to 4K to 8K.
There's six. There's 6K.
We're,
We
we
offer a
did
system
16.
even.
Yeah, like yeah, not many people do. But some people do. Not many. But I mean, the real question is why didn't we just go straight to 16K? I mean,
Yeah.
why didn't we just double 8K and go to 16? But yeah, I mean, all of this stuff. Like, I'm trying to think of why you would shoot in 12K, and it's kind of just the same thing as like 8K. Like, it depends on where you're going. Like, if you're going for this is going to be people going to be watching it at home. 8K is overkill already. Like
Sure.
4K, and a lot of times is overkill. Like the human eye cannot see the difference between 4K and 2K on most people's like home cinemas. Like you have to
Right.
have a giant screen way too close to you to see a difference often. In terms of like pixel density, I mean, you can talk about like the like compression and stuff. That's a totally different topic. But like pixel density, and
Yeah.
like 12K, like even like IMAX, I think maybe IMAX if you're in like the first couple of rows. So it's more for things like digital reframing. I'm sure it'd be great for like some VFX kind of work where you really need that higher pixel density that then you're going to turn down to like 4K or something and deliver
Sure.
later. But yeah, I am going to be really interested to see like who is using 12K in a like I don't want to say serious, but like where 8K wouldn't cut it kind of scenario.
Hmm.
Because yeah, I'm very curious if did Blackmagic actually release this as a solution to a problem, or is it a hey we got bigger numbers, yay?
Right.
It's
Right.
this happens all the time in marketing. You just need to have a bigger number. It's the whole
Yep.
AMD versus Intel for naming scheme.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
oh yeah, now there's the X570 chipset. It's way better than the Z490 chipset because it's bigger number.
Right.
Great.
But
Now
that's like the
Intel
same.
can't make a Z590 chipset because AMD's done that.
Right. Yeah. I remember what did they do with the? It was like the 99 naming scheme, and AMD like cut them off with the at one point.
Oh yeah.
Something like the X299 to 399 or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Now, yeah. I mean, they do that. okay, this is getting on a tangent, but AMD does that all the time. And it's one of the things that annoys me about AMD is that, like, why can't you just have your own product scheming names? Why do you have to like look at what Intel's doing and then do whatever one number,
One
whatever's the
bigger.
next logical step, you know, yeah, cut in and take over
Yeah.
that one. That just causes confusion for everyone. Like,
Yeah.
then you have people who like aren't really that tech literate, and they look at, well, Intel has this X299 platform, but man, AMD has an X399. I'll go that way. It's like, no, it's not. It's
Yeah, it
totally
doesn't work
different.
that way.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. But for the people that aren't super heavy into tech, like, it's like if I was looking at two cars and one's a V8 and one's a V10, I would assume that the V10 is a bigger engine or a more
Right.
powerful engine.
Yeah.
It's like, nope, never mind. Nope, that's a bicycle. Great.
Right on. Well, actually, I think that brings us to that we're just at our hour mark. So if there's any other questions, you guys get them in right now. Otherwise, we'll say goodbye. That went very, very swift. Is there anything you would like to mention before we go?
I'm just looking over my notes if there's anything else to mention about things. The only other thing really that I had on my notes that we might want to bring up is Adobe Max. They did announce that it's a free event this year. So you can go to max.adobe.com and sign up for Adobe Max.
That'll be cool.
Which it's kind of it's October 20th and 22nd. Like, that's an event we always go to. It's one of our best events of the year. This year, obviously, it's going to be weird. I don't even know if we're a sponsor. I think maybe we're a sponsor still. I don't know. It's a weird event this year. Yeah. But it's a kind of a funny one that, like, it's free this year, but like in the past, you could always watch all the sessions afterwards, like a week delayed, and watch all the sessions for free.
Yeah.
But now it's free live, I guess. And if you sign up, I think they have like entered to win swag, so you can win some Adobe swag.
Ooh,
maybe.
All right.
Probably not.
Nice, maybe. Yeah.
If it's free, you just got to set up like bot accounts and.
There you go. All those one-off, like what are those destructible emails that only last for 24 hours?
Or just if you use Gmail, just put a plus sign and then anything afterwards, and it goes to your main email.
That's right.
I use that all the time. We use that for all of our Creative Cloud accounts that we use for testing.
So one last little bit. Matthias, I think it's going to be Matthias Nyholm on YouTube, is asking for Zen 3 predictions.
Man, who knows?
Which is always a little touchy for us, because I know, and I think you have a similar problem. We know a lot more than the general public sometimes, and it fuzzes out in my mind. Like, should I talk about this? Is it okay? Wait, I know this, but can I say this?
Yeah.
And so I tend
to
NDA
or is this public?
Like, I just tend not to. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's
what is
a
that?
really hard thing for us. Usually my answer is, we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, because honestly, even if we were allowed to like talk about something that AMD told us, honestly, I wouldn't trust it. I don't trust anything that AMD or Intel or Nvidia or Adobe or anybody says pre-launch.
You can't. I'm always a pusher on that. Of like, one, I don't like getting into rumor and that kind of that talk, but two, you can't trust marketing. Period. There's
Except
too many
us.
to
our marketing. Totally.
Well, our marketing's a little different. Our marketing is like has replicatable data backed like results. But I'm talking about when AMD's up on a stage or Nvidia's up on a stage and they show you a bar graph that says our stuff is 30% faster, but with no Z or X or X or Y axis, no comparison against what 30% faster than what. Then my cereal box. Like, I cannot flat out. Don't I get riled up about it even. It bugs me.
Oh,
especially bar graphs. Bar graphs kill me in marketing all the time. I hate it.
This is what I probably shouldn't even say this, because this is going to be really poking at AMD. But on one of their recent launches, they had a chart showing that like whatever this video card was, it's as fast as this Nvidia video card that is this much more expensive. And like, okay, great, it's as fast, but it's cheaper. The problem is the test that they showed was a CPU based test. Oh, so it's like, okay, great. When the video card doesn't matter, it's as fast as the higher end video or the more expensive video card. It's like, great, but that's a CPU test.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So you always have to. It's always hard because like those marketing departments, like it's not always like engineers who or people who really know. They just like, oh, here's a whole bunch of numbers and this one looks good. So
Right. Oh, here's a just I suppose just if we can go just a little bit longer. This is a good question. Is your pre-configured recommended system for Adobe Premiere Pro setup adequate for VR gaming?
yeah, almost always it's going to be fine. The biggest thing is like a lot of our Premiere Pro systems, they start off with kind of more mid-range GPUs because usually video editing, you don't need a high-end GPU. It's going to be just as fast as mid-range. Whereas VR gaming, you're going to want a little bit beefier of a video card. So that's probably really the only difference is you'll want to turn up the video card a little bit more than otherwise we would recommend for Premiere Pro. Other than that, like, yeah, CPU is fine, RAM's fine, storage is fine.
Right on. Well, all right. I think that's a good place to end it. So thank you, Matt, for joining us. For an hour today. And thank you guys, the audience, as well, for joining us. We do this sort of thing every Wednesday and Friday at 1 p.m. Wednesdays, we bring in industry experts to kind of talk about their workflow and things going on in their industries. And on Fridays, we bring in our labs experts to talk about kind of that crossover of the hardware and software, kind of giving updates on where we're at on the forefront of those sort of industries. So thanks, Matt, for coming on.
Absolutely. Always.
Right on. And so we'll see you guys next time. Next Wednesday, we're having Eugene Capon of Studio Capon coming on. And that'll be Wednesday at 1 p.m. So mark your calendars for that. And stay tuned to the social media stuff as well. It's always getting broadcast out on that. So we'll go see you guys next time.
Yeah.